Don't make me destroy you.
Welcome! It's been a while since we've built a PC, and in this video we're going to be building a beast.
Alright.
But this little screwdriver here should be the little sneak peek what is coming up.
From the screen to the ring to the pen to the...
And if you know about PCs, this is going to be exciting because it's not just any PC. As always, it's going to be a creative PC. Let's go. This video is brought to you by Asus ProArt P16, the ultimate creator laptop that doesn't just look good, but lets you bring the workstation performance anywhere. Professional 16-inch 4K OLED display, AMD Ryzen 9 AI CPU, and NVIDIA RTX 4070 GPU, and that's just the beginning. Go check out our whole playlist about this device and the full overview in the video description below. Thanks Asus ProArt for sponsoring this part of the video. Now, by the time you're watching this, probably some news about new Intel CPUs and AMD stuff is going out. But regardless, we're gonna build something very special because it's a Threadripper. We're using Gigabyte Aero-D TRX50 motherboards. This motherboard is an ATX form factor. So a lot of the Threadripper motherboard out there are eATX, or they're bigger than ATX. eATX means extended, so basically bigger than usual. But basically, this should fit into a very special case that we have in there. You'll see in a minute. By the way, if you enjoy these types of videos, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll keep building this PC. By the way, if you're thinking, goodness me, this is a little bit expensive, did you know that there's build guides to the latest best bang for buck creative PCs in the video description below? You just pick the one that's closest to your budget, and then you can just build yourself and follow all the guides in there. You can build yourself an absolute beast. If you want, feel free to check them out. So the first thing, we're gonna have to install the CPU. And for that, we need the special screwdriver. And we did the 64-core Threadripper build before. This time, only 32 cores and 64 threads. So this is the 7970X. So the way we do this here is you open that. You're gonna slide it in. Click, click, click. That's what we want. Next up, the SSD. And on this motherboard, it's very, very simple. We just pop this one out. It should be toolless installation. There is 4 SSDs that we can put in here. So as a creator, that makes me super excited. Just for this build, I don't need to install many of them, but you could easily add more. By the way, the thing here is every one of these drives is Gen 4 if I'm not mistaken. If you want to see the full overview of this motherboard, check out the video on the channel. We're going to pop that SSD on the top slot, and the SSD we're using is the Samsung 990 Pro, one of the best Gen 4 drives that you can get. A little bit of a underperformer for this build, but still one of the best bang for buck OS SSDs that you can get for your main OS or system drives. Check them out in the video description below. It's nice that the thermal pad is on both sides of the SSD, keeping it nice and cool. That's it. Now for RAM, that's where things get slightly complicated. The Threadripper platform uses RDIMMs, so you can't use any normal RAM sticks. So what I have here is the DDR5 Zeta R5 Neo from G.Skill. This is 128 gigabytes and runs at 6,000 megahertz, which is very, very fast. Now, before we go to the next step, I'm just gonna screw these onto here. These are for our AIO. Now, for the case, we're using the Lian SUP-01. By the way, did you know that SUP in Estonian means a soup? Now, this is another bit that makes this build very, very interesting and special, because this case is got a little bit of a unique form factor. it is a lot taller than your usual cases. So on the table, it actually takes less table real estate, but still packs absolute a ton of power. Back panel is a full mesh for good airflow. Front panel, exactly the same thing. And it's even got a secondary magnetic dust sheet. Tempered glass side panel. There is no space to put a GPU in here. And this is the riser cable that goes onto your GPU slot. And then the GPU actually goes in the front here, which makes this case like very, very skinny and tall. This is the secondary chamber where the cooling actually works. So you've got 3 120mm fans already pre-installed. And this is where your AIO can go up to 360mm and your cooling. And the GPU is actually going to draw air from the front into the PC, and then it kind of goes out from the back in there. And I assume the AIO will draw air in from the back side here as well, and then out from there. And the top comes off from the back here, which also has a mesh filter in here, magnetic, that you can remove, as you can see. This guy that comes in the box is a rear fan mount. Now, as you can see, you can't fit a 120mm fan anywhere inside, but you can fit a 120mm fan in here, and then that will just go onto there. Then if we're looking over here, we've got a mirror, and if you undo this screw here, this cover actually comes off. And this is an SSD cover, so now you can fit 2.5-inch SSDs into here through these little mounts that are on the accessory box, which is pretty genius. You don't see any of the SSDs, you just cover them. This panel on the top here can also come off, which we're gonna have to do because our AIO is not gonna fit through this part here. So before I'm going to put the motherboard in, what you can see here is it supports the ATX back connect motherboards because there's these big cutouts in here. So if you want any of the clean aesthetics in the front, you can do that. As you can see, if we would have had eATX motherboards, it would have just laid over here, and then our GPU would have not fit and so on. So it would have been a bit more complicated. Now, absolutely fine. And what I want to do is straight away put this riser cable in as well. One of the downsides here is if you are a creator and you need some kind of capture cards or any of the other things on your other PCA slots, then it's probably not gonna work as well because you're gonna have to find some other riser cables and so on. And there's really nowhere to put them anywhere else. So this is really meant for a one GPU layout. Now the easy DIY aspect here is really nice. Usually these thumb screws on PC cases, what I've found, they have been tightened way too tight and you can't actually thumb open them. Look at that, I can just get this off. Now for the power supply, we're gonna go for something big. So this is Seasonic PX 1600, 1600 watt power supply, 80 plus platinum. So the fans actually come off and they're on a mount like that. They're actually very nice, aggressive fans. Look at the design of these. These are just not any cheap fans. They shift quite a lot of air. Look how many CPU and PCIe connectors this one has. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 8-pin PCIe connectors if you wanted to, plus 2 CPU power connectors. 21 and a bit. But this case supports 22 centimeter power supplies if you don't want to remove the 3.5-inch drive bay that we have on the back here. And I'm going to see if I can get away without it. But before that, I need to install some PCIe cables as well. I probably could squeeze in everything into here without removing the drive cage, but in order to make it a little bit simpler for myself, I'm going to remove it. Now, interestingly, because I don't have the CPU connectors like on that side of the motherboard, which they usually are, there is like a little place for the CPU cables to go from that side. You know, they go like down all the way from the back there and then on the side. Mine are actually gonna have to come from the front because the CPU EPS power connected placement is like a bit weird over there. For the AIO, we're gonna use the NMX LICTEC 2 TR4, very special AIO because it's got a very large connector for the CPU. So all of it will be covered and it's a very, very good cooler. The only downside of this cooler is the weak included fans, these ones, they don't do a very good job. But we've got the Lian Unifan P28 performance fans. They're also black and I'm gonna install them. The idea of the airflow is that I want our CPU to get fresh air from the side here. So the fresh air comes in from there. And then the other fans that are on the side here, they will be exhausting because the GPU will be blowing air inside the case out from here. So you want the hot air to actually be exhausting here. So I'll be blowing hot air in and then the hot air kind of comes on this side or out from that side and then exhausts out from here. Also, the good side about these fans is you don't have 3 cables. You're just gonna have 1 cable coming from them, which will make the cable management a lot easier. So before I'm gonna go to the radiator, I'm actually gonna mount the block onto the CPU. But before that, I'm gonna give it a little clean. See, look at that. You think our CPU is clean? No way. Oh my word, look at that. For the paste, let's use the Thermal Crystal Cryonaut. If you want to check them out, in the description below. They're one of the best ones you can get. And the interesting thing with these is that you can actually put this end onto the tube, and then now you can squeeze it on, and then literally already spread it as well with this. Okay, and then you can squeeze it back inside, and there we go. Now I'm gonna leave a little bit of an edge from the sides because the paste is just gonna spread onto the sides. Alrighty. The only thing about NMX AIOs is the logo is ugly. I would prefer some kind of a E on it or something like that. Come on, you can come up with better than that. Okay, now that's installed. We're gonna flip it back this side. Bear in mind, when using these fans, you're gonna have to have longer than usual, you know, these radiator screws, because they have to go through the fan, which is a little bit thicker than usual, into the radiator. But the good thing is, because these 3 clip together, I don't need to use 6 screws. I can only use 2 if I wanted to, but I'll probably use 4. 3 screws will do. And now comes the part where we need a GPU for this. In one sense, I would love to put an Arc A770 here and then actually get, you know, full on Intel Quicksync on AMD Threadripper platform. That would be amazing. But then at the same time, I'd love to showcase you how big of a GPU you can put in here. In fact, like any 4090s would kind of fit in here. There's 4 slots on the bottom there. You could easily put anything in here. I've got an RTX 4080 Super from ASUS TUF. So let's see how this fits into here. This card actually is the same size as RTX 4090. Because this power supply doesn't have native PCIe 5.0 connector, or this one, we're gonna have to use this converter, but it'll be all right. You can screw it in from underneath there. What I'm gonna do is actually move this GPU slightly closer. As you can see right now, I've got it on the closest to the motherboard, but then that will maybe be a little bit tricky with my cable management. So I'm gonna move it 1 step closer to the front, so I'll have a little bit of a gap. What we wanna do here is now attach this on there, okay? So we can see that this is gonna hold this tight. And as you can see now, our GPU is pretty solid. It's gonna get nice fresh air from this side and then blow it into that. Okay, now this is just gonna go over there just like that, but looks like I'm gonna have to move this GPU bracket a little bit more that way, which we can do through these screws over here. I'll just move it all the way to the front there. Now this can actually be removed as well, this GPU bracket, and you can, you know, kind of fix the GPU and then put it in there and do it that way, because you'll actually have to have a HDMI cable or DisplayPort cable, or however you want to do it. You're gonna have to pre-route it and plug it in underneath there. So the DisplayPort cable routing, as you can see, my pink side is over there, and then the other side you just push out from the back there, and then voila, you've got it routed. There is actually a little clip underneath there, so you can put the cables in there and tighten them up so your cable is nicely out of the way going there. That is very, very nice and sleek. Push these fans in, and there we go. That goes into there. So as you can see, cold air into for our CPU, and then hot air out from the side here, blowing it out from the GPU. Now the only downside here is that there might be a little bit of a circulation going. Either one fan is pulling the other one in or the other way. And if I flip those fans the other way, you're gonna start pulling air in from the backside here, because it's got negative air pressure. It starts pulling air in from everywhere and it gets a little bit dusty inside. But I'm gonna try this layout for the airflow and then see how this works, because I think this is gonna be the best one for the CPU cooling. Last few adjustments on this side. I'm gonna put the back panel on from this side because I wanna move this GPU as far back to that way as possible. So I'm gonna have this bend as nice as possible. So what we'll do is undo these, and then now our GPU is over there. Now if I had PCIe 5.0 cable, it would actually look a much sleeker, but this is the worst case scenario what you can put in there. This is a massive GPU. Alright, and as you can see, these tubes are extruding also the case. Actually, where you put the tubes is over here. There's this Velcro strap on the side. What you can do is push the tubes into there. There we go. There's one more thing left to do. I forgot this as well. There we go. Everything should be on. There's some red lights on. The actual power button is this Lian logo over there. So the cool thing is there's actual little RGB kind of a hub built into the front panel, so I can change the different modes and colors. Ooh. It's checking the RAM right now. As you can see, we are on BIOS. For some reason, the way this has configured, usually I can record, you know, the output, what I'm putting out on the HDMI cable from the GPU directly, but right now I can't. So this is the BIOS. Okay, let's take a look. Look at that. 32 cores, 128 gigs of RAM. We're gonna have to update the BIOS because that is, you know, old. We've got our M.2 in there, Samsung 990 Pro, 1 terabyte one, and PCIe X16. There is also the GPU in there, so everything seems to be working. Now we need to set up the PC, and then I'll see you in a minute. Now here's the interesting thing. I actually added something else to the PC that you didn't see me build. I added a secondary GPU. When I was building the Threadripper system and with the RTX 4080 Super, I thought if I'm gonna make this into my personal rig, I probably would like a hardware acceleration for H.265 10-bit 422 footage as well, which we're often using on this channel. But then I thought, okay, I'm not gonna get it from Threadripper, I'm not gonna get it from NVIDIA, I'm gonna get it from Intel, but this is not possible. But then I remembered I have this tiny little GPU. I mean, look at this guy over there. This is ASRock Arc A380, and this doesn't require any PCIe power cables. You're just gonna slot it in there. It's gonna get all the power it needs from the actual PCIe slot. And now what this allows me to do is have hardware acceleration on Threadripper, which I'll show you in a minute, but also Do you remember how the display ports and all the video outputs on the RTX 4080 or whichever GPU you're going to be using are on the bottom there? It's very hard to get to. Now I actually have extra 2 monitor outputs on the back there. So if I want to run any extra monitor or something like that, I don't need to pull the back panel out. I can just plug it in the back. I actually have video output. And because it's the low profile one, it actually fits directly onto there. It's super cheap. I'm going to leave the link in the description below as well. So if you're running a Threadripper system, highly recommend getting this one as well if you're doing video editing, for example, and want a hardware acceleration H.264 and 5 codecs that NVIDIA or AMD don't allow you to do. So moved the main GPU 1 slot down, but because it's a Threadripper, there's so many PCIe slots, there's no switching basically going on this motherboard. I still get the full bandwidth of the GPU in both of these slots. I've got 10 gigabit in the back, I've got 2 USB 4 ports, and I also have some front panel USB-C connectors, so I've got more USB-C, which is really nice for, because I'm using the Kingston docking station that uses USB-C, and the faster, better USB-C ports I have, the faster the transfer basically is as well. It is limited to 10 gigabits per second, but that's my LAN as well, so I still need it. So it's going to provide me all the I/O I need, and it's actually super quiet. Can you hear the PC? What I've got here is the Cinebench R24 open. I'll open up the actual hardware info as well, so we can check the temperatures of everything what's going on in here. CPU 10-minute multi-core test. I'm gonna start that, and we'll go to hardware info and just take a look at this CPU package. 160 watts, just keep waiting for 1 second. 350 watts, okay? Can we hear the PC? No, I can't. It's still the same, silent. Look at that, 72 degrees. And in this office there is 26.9 degrees Celsius right now. And if you look at the actual core temperatures, the maximum is 67.4 degrees on the CPU. And it just absolutely flies. Because I'm using the Lian P28 performance fans on the back, which are a little bit thicker, they shift a lot of air through. And because the mesh airflow design, I'm getting lots of airflow in the case. I'm gonna keep this going while I'm talking about the airflow and cooling. When putting these tubes in there and then the radiator in the back, I realized that there is actually another benefit of having the radiator in the back of the motherboard blowing onto the back of the motherboard, because the back of the CPU socket often gets very warm or hot as well. That heats up the CPU and all the rest of the things. Now we've got a direct airflow in the back flowing onto the CPU that goes on there. And there's actually a 3-chamber design of cooling. So we've got 1 chamber in the front that allows fresh air to our GPU and then blows it through, and then we have another section in the back there that our fans are pushing the air out that come from our GPU, push them out, and then also other fans that are on the back in the behind the section in there that pull the air in and cool our CPU. And then the 3rd chamber is on the bottom here where our power supply is. This power supply gets in air from the bottom, which also has a dust filter, by the way, in the back that's very easily removable. There we go. That allows really interesting and very different and actually working airflow with even that powerful of a system. I've got a Threadripper in there, 64 threads, and it's ripping them right now. We're still at 81.6 degrees and I can hardly hear the PC. CPU cores are 74 degrees. Look at that. And we're pulling 3,672 points or something like that, 78 points in Cinebench. That's absolutely ridiculous. To make the matters worse, let's open Firmark as well and put a load on our GPU. So now let's get our GPU to do another test here as well. So the GPU is running, the CPU is running in the background. Our CPU is still pulling 350 watts. Let's scroll down to our GPU, and our GPU is also pulling 305, 6 watts. So now we're gonna start to introduce even more hot air inside the case, and we'll see how good this is in terms of the actual airflow and how does it work now. I can feel there's a lot of hot air rising up because the top is mesh as well. That allows just the hot air to not get trapped on the top there, but just go out if it needs to. I can feel the back is blowing out warm air, and this side as well. The fans are blowing the hot air from the GPU out from there. So while the PC is absolutely pegged in the background, I want to talk to you about some of the benchmarks that I ran. I ran the Premiere Pro benchmark, PureBench, obviously, And firstly, I just let the PC do its job. Absolutely default settings, which means that it's going to use Mercury playback and tries to use both of the NVIDIA and Intel GPUs. Just to show you that I do have Intel Arc here as well, as you can see. I've got the driver installed for both of them, 4080 Super and the Arc A380. And then I'm getting this result here, which is absolutely ridiculous, by the way. 16,000 points standard overall score, and the long GOP now is ridiculous. As you can see, both of the standard and extended get really, really high score. Now, if I took the Intel GPU out, here's the actual results we're getting here. So let's put them side by side. You can see we're actually losing on the long GOP scores. We've gone from 150 to 126, which is still not bad for Threadripper and NVIDIA, but the H.265-422, we're not getting hardware acceleration for that because of the Intel Media Engines, and we're losing some of the performance. And if we look at the extended GOP, again, we're getting extra 10-15%, maybe a bit more, just by adding the Arc A380, which is just $150, something like that. Absolutely ridiculous. The rest of the performance, as you can see, is within margin of error. All of them look exactly the same. But then also, I wanted to see what happens if I change the settings from like CUDA, Mercury playback, to actually OpenCL. And I'm not sure if the program actually recognized the settings or actually saved them for the whole benchmark, but I did manage to get a little bit higher score, as you can see. So on the right side, you can see I've got the OpenCL scores, and on the left side, I've got the Mercury playback, which is CUDA, and you can see the OpenCL, we're getting even higher long GOP score. The extended one is not that much higher, but the raw score is a little bit higher, and interframe is a little bit higher. So it's an interesting option there. Even the GPU effects is higher. Now, this could still be within margin of error, so I wouldn't trust that, but in your workflow, just try out if CUDA or OpenCL works better. Just go to Premiere Pro project settings, and then you can change that actually, which, GPU it uses or which GPU architecture it uses for the playback. As you can see, adding that tiny GPU actually does make a nice performance difference. Extra 10-15% in long GOP, that's insane. Bear in mind, if you have it H.265, I'll show you that in a minute, you won't be able to play back certain things with Threadripper. That's absolutely going to be but because of this little guy, we can. So our GPU, as you can see, has normalized because the highest it's been is 71 degrees, and now probably the fans have kicked in and started to blow a little bit. We are 69, 70 degrees, not climbing anymore, as you can see, and we're still pulling 306 watts, something like that. I can hear the fans going a little bit in the background now because our CPU has gone to 83 degrees. It's not actually that much warmer, but I've put the curve in the BIOS actually a little bit more conservative. So it does stay like quite low, but around 80 degrees, it starts to raise a little bit. I could make it actually even quieter just because these temperatures are still fine. So you could let the PC go a little bit hotter, but I'd rather have a little bit loudest on the PC because it's not going to be that hot anyway, but I'm still going to get full performance. And look at that, still absolutely pegging 350 watts, no problem. And we've doing that now for over 10 minutes and our CPU temperature hasn't actually risen. Oh, just went to 85 degrees. The only thing that I'm wondering in this layout that kind of concerns me is usually when you have these big VRMs, all the RAM and VRMs get the cooling, usually the fans that are on the front, and pull the cooler air in and pushing it over this. But in this case, there is not that much airflow over this kind of layout. The GPU will have some kind of blow through and a little bit of blow through that goes through there and it comes up, but it's obviously not going to be as much as having it like a dedicated fans in the front. Now, I want to show you why this is so good. Here is Premiere Pro, and I want to have this task manager open on the side so you can see what we're using, what we're doing. Bear in mind, this Intel GPU has 2 media encoders inside, as well as our 4080 in there as well. So if I'm looking at the timeline here in Premiere Pro, so this is H.265, 422 10-bit, 60 frames per second. And look at that, I've got it at full resolution. If you remember with it, the playback with the Threadripper, 64-core Threadripper with 128 gigabytes of RAM, maybe it was even more. It was absolutely choppy as. It just couldn't play this back. But now I've found that I think AMD, Threadripper, and Premiere Pro and Adobe have worked together, even NVIDIA as well. So now it switches the media engines very, very well. So look at this. I'm just scrolling through this timeline. This is so buttery smooth. That is absolutely ridiculous. So I've got about 3 LUTs on there on top as well. 60 frames per second, H.265, 422 10-bit. I can press play. It's so instant, it's absolutely ridiculous. And look at that, our CPU is actually not doing much at all. It all gets played back on the Intel GPU here. As you can see, Intel decode, we're using these. Depending on the clip, it uses one of the decoded or the other ones. And if I'm scrolling through, it's absolutely amazing. Interestingly, the program knows that Intel media engines are actually better than NVIDIA ones, and it tries to use Intel media engines as much as possible to actually play them back and use the NVIDIA GPU for actually accelerating the hardware. So this is super, super smooth. It uses NVIDIA GPU for the color grading, for example. Now you can see the NVIDIA GPUs there is used as well. So the video editing is absolutely amazing. Another thing that I found interesting about this case and this build is that because it's got a little bit of a taller layout, space it takes on your table is not actually that much because it's a little bit skinnier, not that much longer, even maybe a bit shorter, but a little bit taller. It's 45-liter case, so it's very nice and compact with really nice airflow. Lian says that the airflow performance of this case is actually on par with the Lancool 216, which is a very impressive statement about this case. And the last thing that I really enjoy is the little built-in RGB that I wish more cases would do that, because if you want to change any of the modes, you can easily just hold on to the M button, and then now it swaps from being controlled from the motherboard to actually being controlled by this little controller here. And now I can go different modes and then select different colors if I wanted to. And then let's say you say, do you know what, I don't actually like any of these effects. You just hold on the M button, and then now it syncs with the motherboard, goes red, as you can see, and matches my GPU, and then the rest of the ARGB that's connected to the motherboard. If you want to check out any of these parts that I used in this build, as always, links in the description below. And if this build was a little bit too expensive for you and you want to build yourself the best creator PC for your money, then feel free to check out the actual best bang for buck creator build series in the video description below. So go check them out. Thanks guys for watching. Bye bye.